In a glittering restaurant filled with laughter and clinking glasses, one woman's heart was breaking. Anna had been lured there by her co-workers with the promise of a blind date, only to discover it was nothing more than a cruel prank. Alone at the table, with mocking eyes watching her every move, she wanted to flee in shame. But then something happened that no one in that room could have predicted. A man calm, commanding, and utterly unexpected stepped forward. He wasn't just any stranger. He was Michael Carter, a powerful CEO and single father. And in front of everyone, he dropped to one knee and asked Anna a question that silenced every cruel laugh. Stay with us, because what began as humiliation will turn into a story of courage, family, and love that no one saw coming. The restaurant glowed with chandeliers and golden light, every corner polished to perfection, every table dressed in white linen and crystal. To most who entered, it was a place for celebrations and romance, but for Anna, walking into that world felt like stepping into a trial she hadn't agreed to. At 34, she wasn't accustomed to places like this. She worked quietly at a small marketing firm, someone people overlooked in the office, a woman who rarely drew attention. Tonight, though, her co-workers had insisted she come. "It's a blind date," they said, nudging her with forced enthusiasm. "You deserve some fun." For a fleeting moment, Anna had allowed herself to believe them. Now sitting at a candlelit table for two, she realized the truth. There was no date. The empty chair opposite her mocked her as surely as the muffled giggles from the table across the room, where her colleagues sat pretending to drink, their phones angled just enough to capture her embarrassment. They had staged this as a joke and office prank, designed to entertain themselves at her expense. The waiter had brought water, the clock ticked on, and the chair remained vacant. Every minute stretched longer, pressing on her chest like a weight. Anna's hands fidgeted in her lap. She had come here wearing the only dress she owned that felt remotely special, a navy piece her mother had once helped her choose. Her mother, gone now, had been her anchor. She remembered evenings as a child when her mother gave her brushes and paints, teaching her to draw so she could let her feelings live on paper. Art had been her refuge through heartbreaks and loneliness. But after her mother passed, and after her marriage collapsed in betrayal, Anna put the brushes away. Too much pain lingered in every color. The laughter from across the room grew louder. She really thought someone wanted her, she heard one whisper, not quietly enough. A flush burned up her neck, humiliation crawling through her veins. Memories surged the night she found her husband's text messages, the quiet signature on divorce papers, the way her friends drifted away afterward. She had rebuilt a life, piece by fragile piece, but she had never felt whole. Tonight, the cruel prank ripped open every scar she thought had healed. Her eyes stung, and she reached for her bag. It would be easier to flee, to slip out into the night and disappear before they had more material to laugh about. She was almost on her feet when a shadow fell across the table. "Anna?" A deep voice asked. She looked up, startled. A tall man stood there, broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched by silver. His suit was sharp but worn with a kind of ease that didn't scream for attention. His face carried the kind of weight that came from years of responsibility. She blinked, confused. How did he know her name? The Mater D had, in fact, misdirected him. Michael Carter had come to the restaurant for a quiet dinner meeting with a potential partner, one last obligation before he returned home to his daughter Sophie. But instead of the right table, he had been guided here. Anna shook her head quickly, embarrassed. "I think you have the wrong table." Michael paused, noticing her trembling hands, the way her eyes darted to the group of laughing co-workers nearby. He didn't know the whole story, but he recognized cruelty when he saw it. He had seen that look before on Sophie's face, the first time children at school teased her for not having a mother. He remembered her tears, her whispered question, "Why don't I have what they do?" It had cut him deeper than any boardroom battle. Now here was a stranger with that same wounded expression. Something inside him shifted, an instinct he couldn't suppress. Anna's heart pounded as she considered escaping. She imagined the laughter that would follow her out, the story her co-workers would retell for weeks. The humiliation threatened to choke her. Yet this man's sudden presence disrupted the script. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't mocking. His gaze was steady, compassionate, almost protective. "Would you mind if I sit?" Michael asked gently, his tone leaving no room for ridicule. Anna hesitated. Why would he want to? But her weary heart, desperate for dignity, nodded before her mind could protest. Michael sat, calm as if nothing unusual had happened. To the rest of the restaurant, it looked like two people beginning a dinner. But for Anna, it felt like someone had just thrown her a lifeline. Inside, Michael felt a rare stirring. He was a man who carried grief quietly, who had poured himself into work and fatherhood after losing his wife, hiding behind a fortress of control. But this woman's silent pain had pierced him. He didn't know why he cared, only that he did. As laughter drifted from across the room, Michael glanced at the group with a flicker of disapproval before turning back to Anna. In that moment, he made a quiet decision. He would not let her face this cruelty alone. What began as a night of humiliation for Anna had just taken a turn neither of them could have predicted. The laughter from the other table rippled again, louder this time, their glasses clinking as if Anna's humiliation was their entertainment for the evening. Michael felt his jaw tighten. He had been in enough rooms filled with arrogance to recognize it instantly. But here, it wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at a woman who had done nothing more than hope for a bit of kindness. He studied her face, the way she tried to keep her composure even as her hand trembled against her glass. Something inside him stirred, an instinct to shield her, the same instinct that rose every time his daughter Sophie came home from school with tear-filled eyes. He had promised himself he would never stand idle when cruelty reared its head. And tonight he wouldn't. As Anna shifted in her seat, clearly on the verge of running out, Michael stood abruptly. He didn't think, didn't plan, he acted. Walking around the table, he lowered himself onto one knee before her. Gasps swept through the restaurant, forks clattered onto plates, conversations halted mid-sentence. Even the laughter behind them cut off as though strangled. Every gaze turned toward them. Anna froze, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat. Michael met her gaze steadily, and with a voice that carried across the room, he asked, "Will you marry me?" The words struck like thunder. For a heartbeat, the entire restaurant held its breath. Phones rose, screens glowing as patrons began recording. Anna's co-workers gaped, their smirks dissolving into slack-jawed disbelief. The joke they had orchestrated had been stolen right out of their hands. Anna's mind spun in chaos. This couldn't be real. Was this another cruel trick? Had they roped this stranger into humiliating her further? But then she looked into Michael's eyes and saw no mockery, their only resolve, a strange combination of strength and compassion. Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to protest, to ask what he was doing, but the weight of the room pressed down on her. The sting of laughter that had burned moments ago had been replaced by silence, by curiosity, even awe. For the first time all evening, it wasn't her co-workers controlling the narrative. It was this man kneeling before her. Michael rose calmly, slid into the chair beside her, and leaned close so only she could hear. "I know this is sudden, and I don't expect you to answer. But I couldn't stand by and watch them tear you down. No one deserves that." Anna blinked rapidly, fighting the tears threatening to spill. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He hesitated, then answered with quiet conviction. "Because I've seen it before. My daughter Sophie, she's 8. She's been teased at school for not having a mother. I've watched her come home in tears, asking questions I couldn't answer. I recognized that look in your eyes tonight. I couldn't stay silent." The honesty in his tone disarmed her. For years, Anna had lived with the weight of feeling invisible, unwanted, ridiculed. And here was a stranger, not just stepping in, but risking ridicule himself to give her dignity. Her heart ached with confusion, gratitude, and a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The room slowly returned to life, conversations resuming in hushed tones, though phones still pointed their way. Anna's co-workers whispered furiously, some already slipping out, unable to endure the humiliation of their prank turning against them. Anna hardly noticed. Her focus was on the man beside her, who sat as though the chaos around them didn't matter. They talked quietly as the night went on, untouched meals cooling on their plates. Michael asked about her work, and Anna, hesitant at first, admitted she had once been an illustrator of children's books. She told him about her small gallery show years ago, how art had been her lifeline, how she abandoned it after her mother's death and her marriage's collapse. Her eyes dimmed as she spoke, shame woven into every word. Michael's brow furrowed in recognition. Children's books? Do you know The Lantern Fairy? Her breath hitched. Yes, that was mine. For a moment, his face softened with awe. Sophie loves that book. She reads it every night. She says the fairy's lantern makes her feel safe. He shook his head, almost as if the revelation stunned him. You're the one who gave her that comfort. Anna stared speechless. The book she thought forgotten had been a beacon for his daughter. The walls she had built around her heart trembled. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't worthless. Her work had mattered, had reached someone she had never met. Michael leaned back, exhaling. I don't believe in coincidences. Maybe I was meant to sit at your table tonight. His gaze lingered on her, not with pity, but with something deeper. I'm hosting a charity gala in a few days. Sophie will be there. Would you come? I think she'd like to meet the woman who drew her fairy. Anna hesitated, fear and wonder colliding inside her, but his sincerity left no space for doubt. Slowly, she nodded. For the first time that evening, she allowed herself a small, fragile smile. What began as a night of cruelty had become something else entirely, a door to a future she had never imagined. The afternoon sun poured gently through the tall windows of Michael's home, painting soft golden streaks across the hardwood floors. Anna stood in the entryway, clutching her bag with nervous fingers. She had agreed to come, but now her heart raced as though she had stepped onto a stage she wasn't prepared for. Meeting his daughter felt monumental, heavier even than the shock of his public proposal. This wasn't about spectacle or protection. It was about family, about stepping into the life of a child who had already lost so much. Anna? Michael's voice was warm, steady. He appeared beside her, his expression gentler than she had ever seen it in the restaurant. Sophie's been waiting all morning. Before Anna could reply, a small figure peeked from behind the staircase. Sophie, in a simple lavender dress, held a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her dark eyes were wide with shyness, but when Anna smiled, something shifted. The little girl took tentative steps forward. You're the fairy lady? She asked softly. Anna blinked. The fairy lady? Michael chuckled. She means the lantern fairy. Sophie's eyes lit up. You drew her. The fairy with the glowing light. I knew it was you. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded, worn page, the cover illustration from the book, clearly treasured. She held it out with pride. This one. I sleep with it under my pillow. Anna's throat closed. She knelt to Sophie's level, her voice trembling. Yes, I drew that. You really keep it with you? Sophie nodded firmly. The fairy makes me brave. When I miss Mommy, I look at her lantern. I think it means someone is watching over me. Tears filled Anna's eyes before she could stop them. She had drawn that lantern years ago, pouring her grief and hope into the light after her mother died. She had abandoned art when life crushed her, convinced it had meant nothing. And yet here was a child, across time and distance, who had carried that drawing like a shield. Michael watched, silent but moved. He had seen Sophie cling to that book night after night, whispering to the fairy as though she were real. He had never imagined he would meet the woman behind the illustrations, let alone invite her into their home. Anna gently touched Sophie's hair, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much it means to hear that." For the first time in years, something warm flickered in her chest. Her art hadn't been forgotten. It had lived on in ways she never imagined, weaving threads of comfort into a child's life. She wasn't invisible. The rest of the afternoon unfolded with surprising ease. Sophie dragged Anna to her room, eager to show her crayon drawings taped to the wall. "I try to draw like you," she said proudly. Anna encouraged her, giving small tips, her hands guiding Sophie's gently. She felt herself slipping into a role she hadn't thought possible, a mentor, almost a mother figure. Michael stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame. His heart ached as he watched Sophie laugh, the kind of laughter that had been scarce since his wife's death. And next to her, Anna, with her quiet strength and tender eyes, seemed to fill a void he had thought permanent. But fear gnawed at him. He had opened the door to this connection, yet he worried, what if Anna walked away? Sophie couldn't bear another abandonment. Later, as Sophie napped, Michael and Anna sat in the living room. The silence between them was comfortable, but layered with unspoken truths. Michael finally spoke. "I wasn't exaggerating when I said you saved her. That book, your lantern. It gave her hope when I couldn't." Anna shook her head softly. "I abandoned that part of myself. After my divorce, I thought my art didn't matter. I didn't think I mattered." She glanced at him, her voice breaking. "But seeing her clutch that page, it's like finding a piece of myself I thought was gone." Michael's gaze softened. "Maybe that's what healing looks like. We give pieces of ourselves away without realizing who they'll reach." Anna's chest tightened. For years she had hidden her wounds, convinced they defined her. Yet here was a man carrying his own grief, raising a daughter with quiet resilience, offering her a perspective she had never considered. The moment stretched, heavy with meaning. She could see the loneliness in his eyes, the burden of fatherhood and leadership carried without complaint. And beneath it, a longing for connection, for someone who understood. Michael cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "The gala is in 2 nights. It's for children's education. Sophie will be there, and so will people who, let's just say they won't make it easy. There will be questions, cameras." "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Anna hesitated. Fear curled in her stomach at the thought of being scrutinized again. But then she remembered Sophie's drawing on the wall, the way the child had smiled when she called her the fairy lady. She nodded slowly. "If Sophie wants me there, then yes, I'll be there." Michael exhaled, relief flickering across his face. For the first time in years, he felt something more than duty, more than survival. He felt the fragile beginnings of hope for himself, for Sophie, and maybe even for Anna. The cruel joke that began in a restaurant had carried them to this living room, where laughter echoed once more, and light like the lantern Anna had drawn was beginning to glow again. The gala glittered with extravagance, chandeliers raining light over a hall filled with polished marble, silk gowns, and tuxedos. Anna stepped in beside Michael, her arm hooked timidly through his. She felt as though every eye turned toward them the moment they crossed the threshold. Whispers followed their steps, faint but unmistakable. "That's her, the proposal woman." A mix of curiosity, skepticism, and judgment swirled in the air like smoke. Anna's pulse raced, but Michael's steady hand on her back anchored her. Sophie, dressed in a pale yellow dress, skipped ahead and pointed excitedly at a display of children's art hung on the walls. For a moment, Anna's heart softened. This was why they were here. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about giving children a chance. Yet, as the evening progressed, the undercurrent of scrutiny grew heavier. Reporters circled, their cameras flashing, their questions pointed. One finally cornered them near the buffet. "Mr. Carter," the man said, voice sharp, "was that proposal in the restaurant just a publicity stunt? Some stunt to distract from your company's recent board shakeup?" Another chimed in, microphone aimed squarely at Anna. "And you, miss, are you using this attention to revive a failed career? Isn't it true you've been out of the art world for years?" The questions pierced deep. Anna froze, her breath shallow. The old fears surged back. She wasn't enough. She was a joke, a prop in someone else's story. Her eyes darted toward the exits, panic clawing at her chest. Around them, a ripple of laughter rose from a small group of onlookers. Echoes of that cruel night in the restaurant. She wanted to run. Michael saw her shoulders tighten, her hand trembling in his. He had seen this before, his daughter shrinking under cruel words, silenced by shame. Not tonight. Not again. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, pulling Anna gently beside him. His voice carried across the room, firm and clear. "That was no stunt." The crowd stilled, microphones poised. "When I proposed to Anna that night, it wasn't a game. It wasn't to protect my company or my reputation. It was because I saw cruelty being done, and I refused to let it stand." He paused, glancing at Anna, his eyes softening. "And what I didn't expect was to find in her someone extraordinary. That night wasn't the end of a joke, it was the beginning of something real. She's not here for fame or convenience. She's here because my daughter already calls her the fairy who brings light into dark places. And his voice thickened, though his resolve never wavered. "I call her the woman I choose with my heart and for my family." For a moment, silence blanketed the hall. The air was electric, charged with something raw and undeniable. Then applause erupted, filling the space with a thunderous wave. Some clapped politely, others with genuine admiration, but no one laughed. Reporters lowered their microphones, stunned into stillness. Anna stood frozen, her hand in his, her eyes wet. She had never been defended like that, never been claimed not out of pity, but with conviction. She turned toward Michael, and for the first time, she believed. Then Sophie appeared, weaving through the legs of tuxedoed men and sequin dresses, clutching a folded piece of paper. She tugged at Anna's dress, her small face beaming. "I made you something," she said. Anna knelt, unfolding the drawing. 3 figures, hand in hand, stood under a house glowing with a bright yellow lantern. Above, Sophie had scribbled in crooked letters, "Our family." Anna pressed the picture to her chest as tears blurred her vision. The cruel voices, the skeptical eyes, the cameras, all of it fell away. All that mattered was this small girl who had given her the one thing she had longed for her entire life: belonging. Michael crouched beside them, his arm wrapping around both. "See?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "She already knows." Anna could only nod, overwhelmed. For years she had thought of herself as broken, discarded, invisible. Yet here, in front of 100 strangers, she was being declared worthy, chosen, loved. As the applause still echoed, Michael's gaze met hers with quiet promise. Tonight wasn't about salvaging pride or silencing critics. Tonight was about truth. And the truth was undeniable. What began as a cruel prank had blossomed into something profound, something none of them had expected, but all of them desperately needed. The gala had ended, but Anna's heart was still racing as she stepped onto the terrace. The city spread out below, glittering with 1,000 lights, but it was the quiet above the stars pricked into the night sky that calmed her nerves. Michael followed, his jacket draped loosely over his arm. Behind the glass doors, Sophie slept curled up in a chair, her drawing of "Our Family" resting on her lap. The sight filled Anna with an ache so deep it almost hurt to breathe. Michael joined her at the railing, the night breeze stirring his hair. For a moment, they stood in silence, listening to the muffled hum of the party inside. Then he turned to her, his expression stripped of the public confidence he carried so easily. He looked almost vulnerable. "I need you to know," he began quietly. "Tonight wasn't about silencing critics. It wasn't about appearances. It was about truth." Anna's throat tightened. She had lived so long in the shadows of doubt, fearing she was only ever a placeholder, a joke, a temporary fix. Now, hearing the sincerity in his voice, she felt something crack open. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. This time there were no cameras, no curious onlookers, only the two of them and the quiet witness of the stars. He dropped to one knee, his eyes never leaving hers. "Anna," he said, voice steady but tender, "that night in the restaurant, I asked you to marry me to shield you from cruelty. Tonight, I'm asking because I love you. Because you bring light into Sophie's life and mine. Will you marry me not as an act of protection, but as a promise of forever?" The words stole her breath. She saw, in a rush of memory, the woman sitting alone at the restaurant, mocked and discarded. And she saw herself now wanted, chosen, loved. Tears welled in her eyes, and for once she didn't fight them. She let them fall. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger, firmer, "Yes, I will." Michael rose, sliding the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. Relief and joy softened his features as he pulled her into his arms. For a long moment, they simply held each other, two souls stitched together by shared wounds and newfound hope. Inside, Sophie stirred and woke, rubbing her eyes. She blinked when she saw the ring glinting on Anna's finger. A wide smile spread across her face. "I knew it," she said softly, padding out onto the terrace and hugging them both. "Now we're really a family." Anna bent to hold the little girl close, her tears dampening Sophie's hair. "Yes, sweetheart. We are." From that night on, life began to weave itself into something new. Anna returned to her art, not to escape pain but to celebrate healing. She held workshops for children, teaching them to paint their fears and their hopes, just as her mother had once taught her. Sophie was her eager apprentice, her laughter filling the studio as she mixed colors and drew lanterns in every shade of yellow. Michael, too, changed. The man who had once lived behind walls of steel and schedules learned to slow down. He left the office earlier, traded boardrooms for family dinners, and found that success was sweeter when it was shared with the two people who had brought him back to life. Together, they created a home where light was not a metaphor, but a presence, warm lamps glowing in windows, drawings of lanterns taped to walls, laughter echoing through rooms that had once been silent. What had begun as a cruel prank meant to humiliate Anna had become the doorway to a family bound by love, resilience, and faith in second chances. On evenings when the three of them sat together, Sophie often pulled out her crayon drawing of their family, the one she had given Anna at the gala. It was wrinkled now, edges fraying from being carried everywhere, but Anna always placed it carefully on the mantel. To her, it was more than paper and crayons. It was proof that cruelty had been transformed into belonging, that broken hearts could be made whole, that light could emerge from darkness. And as they held hands under the glow of that simple picture, Anna knew with certainty she was no longer invisible, she was home. What began as a cruel attempt to humiliate Anna became the turning point that gave three people a new life. From the shadows of betrayal and loneliness, she found not just love but a family proof that even the darkest nights can be lit by a single lantern of hope. Michael, once a guarded single dad, discovered that true strength is not in power or wealth, but in opening his heart to love again. And little Sophie, with a child's innocence, showed them both that belonging is the greatest treasure. This story reminds us that even in our most painful moments, kindness and courage can transform cruelty into healing. If this touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more soul-stirring stories, because sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings.